We are just one day away from Utah and BYU facing off for the first time as Big 12 opponents. Who's going to come out on top? And if Utah wants to win, who needs to play well? That's what we're breaking down on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen and view of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. If it's your first time listening to our show, make sure you like and subscribe. Love interacting with everyone in the YouTube comments, as well as on social media, where you can follow our show on X at Locked On Utes. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. You can visit FanDuel.com today to get started. My name is JT Wistersill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. Excited to be joined by KSL.com's Josh Furlong, who's also AP Top 25 voter. And Josh, this game features a team ranked in the AP Top 25, but not the one we thought it would coming into the season. So this game, massive implications. Utah trying to get a win and still prove that, hey, even in a down year, we're still a better program than BYU. BYU trying to have a perfect regular season, set themselves up for college football playoff success. This one gets underway in just a day, and I can't wait.
Yeah, this one's going to be a fun matchup. I mean, it always is, right? I mean, you always want to have this rivalry game, especially now that they're in the same conference. It means more, and so it's a fun opportunity to see these two teams that, for as much as there's a lot of people that want to try to make this a really collegial and different things there, they hate each other. I mean, they really do. Like, they love each other in terms of who they work with. Like, a lot of the people on the staff have worked under Kyle Whittingham, so it's not like they hate each other on that personal level. But from a football game standpoint, I mean, these two are bitter rivals, and it's always fun, right? Like, it doesn't matter what your record is coming into this game. It's always kind of chaotic. There's a lot of fun with it, associated with it, a lot of emotion. And both teams absolutely want to win. And for Utah, obviously they've had the upper hand for the last, decade plus. And so for them, they've, preached it inside their culture that you just don't lose to this team. So really fascinated to see how this goes, especially with how these two teams are playing this year.
I am too. And I love that you mentioned Kyle Whittingham, because that's something we're going to dive into. Players on both sides of the ball for Utah. Got to play well, a little bit more on the matchups, everything there. But before we do, I think one storyline that's been overlooked by everyone kind of going into this week, this could be the last time that Kyle Whittingham coaches against BYU, coaches in this rivalry game, a rivalry that he has been so successful in. We talked about, I mean, you look at the all-time history, Utah obviously has won 9 of the last 10 games in particular. So Witt's been incredibly successful against the school he played at. But it's crazy to think we don't know where he's going to land, right? Like, going into the year, I was like, oh, it makes a lot of sense for him to ride off into the sunset. But riding off into the sunset after this season doesn't seem as ideal for someone as competitive as Kyle Whittingham. So we have no idea if he's going to retire after this year or whenever he does. But the fact that this could be his last game against BYU is significant.
Yeah, I mean, this is, Kyle Whittingham has always prided himself on not losing to BYU. Throughout the years, this has become a very passionate rivalry for him. I heard on him talking on the coach's show earlier in the week, where he said over the last 50 years, a Whittingham has been associated with either BYU or Utah. I mean, this is a family thing for them. And yeah, he played there. But he's petty enough that he doesn't even want to say the school's name, right? Like, he just wants to call them the in-state rival. That's how much he wants to beat this team. And so, whether this is his last time, and I think that's probably trending in that direction, that this may be his last time. There may still be some juice in the tank, right? I mean, he's always said that when he feels like it's time to go, he'll go. But I think this is getting to that point. And what better way than to spoil BYU's special season, right? If Utah can come in there and Kyle Whittingham can still show that Utah's got the upper hand, I mean, that just that's a great way to ride out on the sunset type thing, right? Like, I know the season hasn't been as ideal, and everything hasn't worked out the way that they want to, but I think if you can get a win over BYU, that's the ultimate bragging rights, knowing that you did what you did on their special season, and it was your last season to be able to kind of ride out, and they can't do anything about it.
Say you got him one last time. It's what North Carolina can say against Coach K when they met up in the Final Four that one year. North Carolina got to beat Coach K one last time. That's exactly what Coach K wanted, was one more win over his rival. And Utah wants one more win here. This is a Utah team that they've had a signature win every season as of late. But like, you look at the last three in particular, right? The regular season wins against Oregon and USC before you go on to win Pac-12 championships. That win at USC last year, still so massive, gutsy win against a Trojans team where it's like, okay, they're finally going to beat Utah. And maybe Utah's signature win, when we look back, we'll say, oh, well, they still found a way to win against Oklahoma State, but that win obviously does not look very impressive right now. So this would fall much more in line, an upset against BYU in this program's signature win they get each season. And in order to get a signature win for Utah, they're going to need to do something on offense. I don't think Utah's offense needs to roll out there and score 30 points. You look at this BYU team, and the last time they played a top 50 defense, which is what they'll be playing in Utah, they were held under 20 points. I don't think Utah's going to hold BYU under 20. I think it's going to be very close. I think it will be a lower scoring game, though. I don't see the Cougars can very well get over 30. I think Utah will be able to hold them under that mark, but Utah has to get something out of their offense. Utah has been running the ball well enough. Has it been a dominant ground game? No, but the offense is consistently in third and manageable, showing the running game is doing enough for them to produce on offense, and you need to get something out of the quarterbacks. We still don't know if it's going to be Isaac Wilson or Brandon Rose. I know we've seen the Rose emojis being thrown around on X, but I'm not going to comment on that since there's nothing confirmed. So right now, honestly, I still feel like there's a really good chance we see Wilson, just because he is the one who originally beat out Rose, even though he has been struggling. But whoever goes out there for Utah, they're not going to be asked to do too much, just deliver on some of the money downs. And a couple times throughout this game, I think Utah can do that. They just need, really, if they can put together 2 touchdown drives in this game, from like an 80-yard long, like after a touchback, a long touchdown drive, and then hopefully get some turnovers, because we know BYU is going to do that. I feel like that's Utah's recipe for success. And when you look at what Mike Bajakian was trying to do, get some of those shorter passes working, like we saw Brant Keithy break off one of his screen, and there were so many other opportunities for plays to be made in the flat or just in like the hitch, the screen game. Utah didn't make those. If they can just make those types of plays, not even pushing the ball that far downfield consistently, I think they can get the upset.
Yeah, I think, regardless of who is quarterback, this offense has to function in a way that is beneficial to who is under center, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to have whatever Mike Vajakian decides to call, it's not going to be drastically different from what Andy Ludwig had, right? Like, they can't just reinvent the playbook based on where they're at in the season. And so they're going to have to do some things that maybe Vajakian likes more, and whatever, it's still within that playbook. But whatever it is, they have to do what they can to benefit the skill set of their quarterback, whether that's Rose or whether that's Isaac Wilson. And I don't want to say it doesn't matter. I think it does matter, but at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, I think you just need to do whatever you can to help them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so this offense, what it's going to come down to, though, is it's honestly just going to come down to execution. If
Mm-hmm.
Utah can't execute the ball, which is, it sounds pretty simplistic, but if they can't execute the ball, it really doesn't matter who's under center, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is a very good BYU team. Their defense is like looking at Utah in the mirror, right? Like, for the most part, these two teams resemble each other in a lot of ways, and it makes sense based on the coaching staff, but they just try to pride themselves on the same type of things, right? Kalani Sitake has tried to model his program after what Kyle Whittingham's done. It's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of what he's known. Even when Kalani left and went with Gary Anderson modeled his after Kyle Whittingham. So you're not going to get too far away from that. Aaron Roderick, who is the offensive coordinator at BYU, they're going to model it the same way, and they're going to have different wrinkles. But that's where this game's going to come down to, is they have to execute on offense. And if they can't do that, that becomes a challenge. And I think, based on the reactions that we've got this year, or this week, excuse me, I think they're trending in that way, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
you can say all you want leading up to the game, and it doesn't really matter. We've heard that a lot this season. You've got to produce on the field. But I think you have a team that is absolutely locked in. They're coming into this game with a lot of emotion and realization, not realization, because they know that they haven't been good, but maybe more of an added emphasis on understanding this is the game. If you can't get this game, there's not really much more you can do. So I'm really fascinated to see kind of how that game develops within the game, because it's always been talking about the offense. We need to get more offense. There hasn't been a lot of answers, but I think with the bye week, and I think with maybe a renewed effort, maybe this becomes the week.
Maybe it does. That is the hope of everyone listening to this podcast, at least those of you that are Utah fans and not just BYU fans who piled in to dump in the comments. But I am excited to see who is going to come out on top. And I want to still talk about, too, some individuals I expect to go off for Utah in this game. We'll be talking about that and just continue to talk about what this game means for both programs in one moment. But first, today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find those right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. You can truly hire professionals like a professional with LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. That's why LinkedIn is constantly trying to find ways to make the process easier. They even have just created a feature that helps you write job descriptions to cut down on the hiring process. Currently, 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring today. So you can post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's all caps, no spaces. LinkedIn.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. All right, Josh, looking at who is going to go off in this game for Utah. I want to give a couple offensive stat predictions. I'm going to give those, and I want to see your reaction, how you're feeling about those. So for Wilson, I don't expect him, or whoever, Wilson, Rose, you name it. And I loved what you mentioned too about like it doesn't make a huge difference in who kind of does start because they are very similar players, right? I mean, we saw the offense didn't change that much when Rose was in there. Both Rose and Wilson would each move the ball a little bit, and then they commit, each of them at one point committed a turnover that was backbreaking to Utah's victory chances in that game against Houston. So I do think Utah will probably turn it over at least once through the air. I mean, this is a Utah team that's turned it over a lot. BYU has 14 interceptions, but I do think Wilson Rose will throw for around 170 yards, make a couple of plays through the air. I think Brant Keithy is going to have a big game once again. You know, last week a lot of his yards were on that single screen pass that he caught and took to the house. I think this week it's going to be a lot more consistent throughout the game. And actually, I'm going to go with Dorian Singer to make a big play downfield. Just one time, one big pass this Utah team is going to connect on. We saw it happen the last time they were at home with Money Parks. And of course, Money Parks out for the season, unfortunately not available. So we'll see if Munir McClain, a Micah Pittman does different things than Parks, but you just need another receiver to step up there. The other thing I'm really fascinated about too is just the battle on the ground. Utah wants to run the ball because of the quarterback struggles that they've had. And you look at this BYU run defense, 68th overall, but they have allowed 180 yards in back-to-back games to quality backs. RJ Harvey, UCF, then Ollie Gordon at Oklahoma State. Mekhi Bernard's a quality back. He's actually top 20 in missed tackles overall, too. And this Utah offensive line, overall, the run blocking has been pretty good, as I've kind of mentioned before, too, where you have you have one of the best tackle tandems in the Big 12 overall. And then the interior offensive line tight end isn't always executing from there. But I do think Utah can get over that 200-yard rushing hurdle. Mekhi, I think, can have a strong day. Wilson, a couple of scrambles. And Jalen Glover getting in the news for a positive reason than he was earlier in the week. But once again, Utah's offense just has to do enough. If they can get a touchdown drive in each half by themselves and then capitalize on hopefully what is a BYU turnover with a field goal or some form of points, that might be what Utah just needs to get the upset.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, this is a Utah team that has to return to its identity, right? They have to utilize that ground game and really kind of put a lot of emphasis in that. Use that to then develop the play action passes, which will then set up the Brant Keithys, which will then set up the Dorian Singers or whomever else that they have on the outside. But they can't stay away from what, where they've, butter their bread, so to speak. That's what's kind of gotten Utah in trouble the last little bit is they've become so one dimensional, or they've focused on different scenarios where, okay, we got to get the ball outside. Well, yeah, you do, but you still have to develop it in the way that you need to. For example, against Houston, Mekhi Bernard has obviously shown that he's done a tremendous job this year in the run game, but they didn't run the ball that much. I think he ran it 14 times. They had Jalen Glover in there 4 times. And, 18 combined carries, that's just not a lot for what a Utah team usually. No, it's not.
Mhm.
And so, like, it can't just be one player, right? You can't just
Mhm.
fixate on Brant Keithy. You can't just fixate on Dorian Singer or Mackay Bernard. It has to be this complementary effort, especially in the run game. You've got to be able to be, dynamic where you're not just doing inside zone. You've got to get on the outside at times. Jalen Glover against Houston had a lot of great runs on the outside. And, there's things that he's still working on to be able to be in the good graces of the coaches and get into the game. But at the same time, you've got to mix it up. You can't just be so one dimensional that it's real easy for BYU to look at the film and say, we got this. They already know what your system
Mhm.
is anyway because of their coaches. But if you make it even easier by just running the same inside zone play, you're going to do the same exact
Mhm.
type of passes, it's not going to matter, right? So it doesn't matter who those skills players are. If you just continue to do the exact same thing and keep, ramming your head into that wall, it's not going to work. So I think they have to go back to their
Mhm.
standard model, and BYU is going to know what that is, but do things to get off of that, right? Like
Mhm.
fake something, do something where you have a sweep, where you have motion, where you have something to kind of change it up a little bit to help them, to give them some more confidence. And then as the game develops, then you can kind of maybe take some shots, maybe you throw in some trick plays. Maybe you
Mhm.
do some things that allow you to kind of be more dynamic than what you need to. But if you can't establish your identity on offense, it doesn't really matter what you're going to do because BYU is going to sniff it out. They're going to figure it out. They're a great defense. They're opportunistic. They've had a ton of interceptions. They've taken
Mhm.
fumbles. This is the team that is absolutely going to make you pay in the turnover margin if you're not on your game. So it's going to be really interesting to see how Utah manages that, knowing how good this defense is. They obviously go up against their defense on a day-to-day basis. So it's
Mhm.
not like they're not used to this, but when you have a team that's playing with momentum and they're going to be more aggressive, if you're not on your game, it's going to be a really tough challenge.
It will be. And you mentioned good defense. That's something that Utah has had this season. While Utah's defense has not been maybe as dominant as we'd hoped, last year, top 5 run defense, they're nowhere close to that. This defense has kept Utah in every single game, even amidst this losing streak where, as we stated, Utah's averaged 12 points per game over their last 4 games. But all of these games Utah's been in the fourth quarter because the defense does things. They have bended but not broken against TCU and Houston. But this is a game where you hope the likes of a Junior Tafuna, Keanu Tanavaso have missed some time due to injury. We don't know if they're going to come back because that is the way that Utah does their injuries. They don't really reveal that type of stuff. But having guys like Rene Reed, it's another week where he's gotten healthy and continued to get back over the bye week. He could rest up rather than earlier when he was just having to spend time recovering, trying to get back on the field. Same thing for Connor O'Toole. He's been able to practice and get more flow after just trying to work his way back to the Houston game. I think there's reason to expect that this Utah defense can step up. And this Utah secondary has a really good matchup against Jake Retzlaff. I mean, he's not performed well against man coverage. This stat comes to us from the Pro Football Focus College Show, where they noted that Retzlaff is only completing 52% of his passes against man coverage. That's a number I look at like, okay, Utah plays a lot of man coverage. They have corners the likes of Cameron Calhoun, Samaya Vaughn, Smith Snowden, who will they get beat at time to two? Sure. But if you test them too many times, they're going to be able to pick you off. And Retzlaff does have those 7 interceptions. I actually do think he throws 2 picks in this game. I think Teo Johnson gets one, Retzlaff gets one in each half. There's going to be some situations where BYU is going to find themselves in 3rd and long because every game that we've seen from this Utah defense, especially as of late, they have shut down the opponent for stretches of the game. BYU is not going to get shut down in this game completely, but I do believe there will be back-to-back drives where they go 3 and out because this Utah defense is clicking, is firing on all cylinders. I would love to see, I think Lander Barton has a chance to bounce back in this one. He's a guy who's been frustrated, I have to believe, and everyone on this Utah defense has been frustrated, but we know the potential that this group and this team has. So I think Lander's a guy who can pop up here for Utah and do some things. And look, BYU has rushed for over 250 yards in back-to-back games. So Utah's going to have their work cut out for them. But Utah's going to pack the box. We know they're going to be fired up. This Rice Eccles Stadium crowd is going to be fired up. This is the first time we've had the Holy War in over 2 years. And I think there's a lot of reason to believe. Once again, I said the stat off the top of the show. BYU, last time they played a top 50 defense, they were held under 20 points. I think Utah has a chance to make life really hard on BYU's offense.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is where Utah's hanging their hat, right? They're going to
Mm-hmm.
look at this and say, if everybody is healthy on the defensive side, there's nobody that's going to beat us, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't mean it, that's BYU or anybody, right? this Utah defense, they may not have the same flash and the same stats that they've had over years past, maybe havoc plays, that kind of stuff. But when they're healthy, when you get Kalani Reed, in the middle and he's communicating well, when you get Junior Tafuna and Keanu Tanavasa that are building off each other and just hyping up the crowd and hyping up that team, it's really difficult to beat this Utah team. They may get beat early on, those first drives of the game where they're scripted and, Aaron Roderick is going to do what he can to kind of put Utah on their toes. Once they settle in, Morgan Scalley does a phenomenal job of being able to help his team. He stops them on third downs most of the time. Yeah, there's times that they get beat, right? But this is the Utah defense that for the most part does a phenomenal job. Against Houston, yes, they absolutely got wrecked in the run game. Those are the anomalies, right?
Yeah.
There has been trending that way a little bit more where they've allowed more runs this year. So I don't want to say it's a full anomaly, but at the same time, that's just not who Utah is. If they have the complement of guys up front and they have the guys in the back and the linebackers and that secondary where they're playing man coverage, this becomes a very tough Utah team to beat. And Kalani Sitake knows that, right? This is not going to be an easy task for his team. He knows that Jake Retzlaff struggles against man coverage. So what is he going to do to be able to manufacture that in a way that eliminates that? How are they going to disguise their own offense so that Morgan Scalley can't change that up on them, right? This is my favorite part of the game, is probably more how a defense disguises it and how they try to manipulate an offense into thinking they're going to do what they want them to do, right? And so we'll see where that goes. But I think as long as there's so many things in this game where you say as long as the team does this and you do this, well, of course, like that's how you win games. But I think if the defense is playing the way that we've seen them play over the last few years, that's going to absolutely hype up this crowd. If you can shut down BYU, yeah, the offense is going to do their thing, and that's obviously going to get people excited. But if you can get turnovers, or if you can get these havoc plays where you're sacking Retzlaff, or you're getting tackles for loss, or you're picking it, whatever it may be, that's what gets Utah fans excited. And if you can keep that momentum on both sides of the ball, that's going to be the difference. I think that's really going to change this game and make it so that, yeah, it's probably going to be a low-scoring affair, assuming that Utah can do what they need to hold BYU, but that's where they have to win, right? They have to be assignment sound. They all have to work together. They have to communicate. The fact that you have Kalani Reed in there is going to help that. That's going to ease Lander Barton, who is much more of an instinctual player. He's been thinking too much, and when you think, that gets you in trouble on the defense, and that's where he's been at. And so if you can get that where Kalani can say, look, I got this, right? I got the green dot. I'm listening to what the coaches are telling us. I can navigate this. Lander, just go do what you need to do to make havoc plays. That makes it so much easier, and he can do what he needs to do.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I love the point you made too about staying assignment sound, and just the same thing with like the missed tackles, what you talked about there too. Like that's just something that's happened way too much with this Utah team. You tighten that stuff up, and yes, BYU's undefeated, but I've said this all week long, Josh. This BYU team has looked like a team of destiny. They haven't been a dominant team. And sometimes team of destinies often fall short. I think there's a lot of reason to believe Utah can get this upset. I mean, even the line for this game, it's bounced all over the place this week. It's at 3.5 currently right now. So obviously Vegas thinks this game is going to be close because of the rivalry and even some of the on the field matchup things. Let's also just look at the history of this rivalry. And yeah, Utah had a history of winning the games, but not dominant wins, right? You go back to 2010, it was 17-6. Year after that, a blowout victory. But then from 2012 on, every single one of those games until we get back to in 2019, a 30-12 blowout win for Utah. All of those games are one-score games that Utah just found a way to win. And I think there's reason to believe Utah can find a way to win, even though they are facing one of the best teams in all of college football. I also want to come back, though, and talk about just the significance of having this rivalry back and what it means for the state with you, Josh. We're going to be breaking that down in one moment. But first, today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our friends at Robinhood. With Robinhood, they are the place to go because you don't need a silver spoon to eat up financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.5% APY on invested cash and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA account. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. You can sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Terms do apply. For product-specific disclosures, you can visit robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rates may change, and gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold LLC. You can head over to Robinhood Gold today. Also, want to talk about our great friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You can visit FanDuel.com today to join. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets with your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. We got great college football matchups this week, got Alabama and LSU, as well as the great slate across the Big 12, of course, including BYU at Utah. And then you get, of course, we have great college. We talked about college football, but college basketball is even back too. NFL, NBA, whatever your sports fix is, head over to FanDuel today. All right, Josh, wrapping up with this one here. We've talked about this game in its totality. Actually, I should say, is there anything you think we haven't mentioned about this game that is important to hit on? And I do want to touch on the history just of the rivalry and the fact that it's back in a moment. So you can go in that direction if you'd like to.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's anything different than what we've touched on in that regard. I mean, I think this is important, right? The crazy thing is this is the rivalry where nobody has won 10 straight. Utah was
Mhm.
on the cusp of that the last time they played,
Yeah.
and then BYU got it. So it's been tough. I think BYU has done a really good job of kind of erasing some of the talent gaps that have existed over the years, right? I think at the end of the day, I think Utah still has a roster that can compete, right?
Mhm.
4-4 makes it look like this is the team that doesn't have that. I think this is the team that if they play together, they still have, in some regards, an upper hand, right?
Mhm.
One, you're at home. Two, you've got a ton of talent all around. It's just a matter of how you utilize it. It's a matter of how you kind of maximize it to the extent that you can get them to showcase that. So
Mhm.
I think this will be interesting. But at the same time, the odds-on bet is that this is the BYU's game, right? I know a lot
Mhm.
of Utah fans have sold their tickets to the game because they just don't want to see BYU go in there and beat them.
Mhm.
I personally, if I was a fan of this
Mhm.
rivalry, like I don't know why I would sell my tickets, but I get
Yeah.
it. But this, it'll be a fun game, and I think if you love this rivalry, if you love Utah, I mean, there's no reason not to go into this game optimistic. I think nothing about what BYU has done and nothing about what Utah has done says that this game couldn't be different. I understand the odds-on bet is to pick BYU and
Mhm.
probably the safer bet, but I think there's just so much that happens in this game where maybe coaches overthink things or maybe different things happen where it's anybody's game, honestly.
And we've talked about it all week on this show. You've written about it and talked about it all week as well. Look, Utah has a chance to win this game. And at the end of the day, it's your rival. So that's where I'm with you. I just, if you have the chance to go to this game, that's where it is kind of crazy to me in a way that you did decide, like the people who did decide to sell their tickets, because you could be missing out on a historic moment for this Utah football team. We were hoping this would be a historic season for Utah. People were hoping college football playoff, all the things like that, and things that I thought this Utah team was capable of doing. They can't do that anymore. But they can throw a wrench in their rival season in an epic clash. One of those games where it's like, man, where were you when this happened? That's what this game could end up being if Utah gets this monster upset over BYU. And I'm so excited to get this game underway. I'm so excited to have this rivalry back to year in and year out. The in-state clash is always a fun element. I know the two universities even partnered together to do some charitable things for it too. Utah, when the two best teams in the state play, it puts the football in the state in a bigger spotlight and shows the talent off on the national stage. That's what this game will still provide, even though it is, unfortunately, as we both agree, a later kickoff. But I am really excited to have this rivalry back, going forward to the history, the tradition. Life is better when Utah and BYU get to face off in a college football season, and I can't wait for Saturday. Josh, we still got some time until the game gets underway, so if people want to get more prepared to see how it's all going to play out, where do they need to head over to?
Yeah, you can read my stuff at ksl.com or follow me on on Twitter at jfordksl, whatever you want to call it. But
Yeah.
I'll try to give my updates that way.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Josh. Appreciate you stopping by.
Appreciate it.
That's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On Utes. We will have one more show tomorrow leading up to the game, but if you don't get to check that one out, enjoy your Saturday. Utah versus BYU closing in rapidly.